When the music stopped that night, nobody in Detroit knew that a woman named Jennifer Williams had just made a decision that would change the rest of her life. She wasn't in the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. She wasn't surrounded by cameras and celebrities and 30 years of music industry royalty. She was sitting on the floor of a one-bedroom apartment with a phone pressed hard against her ear and a television flickering in the background, listening to a voice she thought she would never hear live again. And in that moment, something happened that no producer, no network executive, and no music critic could have planned for. Whitney Houston wasn't just performing a comeback, she was singing someone back from the edge of everything. Before you can understand what happened on January 31st, 1994, you need to understand just how far things had fallen and how quietly a person can disappear before the world even notices they're gone. By the fall of 1993, the music industry had written its verdict on Whitney Houston, the woman who had redefined what it meant to have a voice, who had made an entire generation of singers reconsider what the human instrument was actually capable of, had gone silent. Not just quiet, she had practically vanished from live performance entirely. Nearly 2 full years had passed since anyone had watched her truly sing in front of a camera without the safety net of studio control and 100 retakes. The tabloids were merciless in the way that era's tabloids excelled at, not with the sharp edge of direct accusation, but with the slow, grinding cruelty of the unanswered question. "Has she lost it?" ran one cover. "Whitney's voice, gone forever?" ran another. The rumor mill worked overtime on whispers that circulated through green rooms, in executive suites, and recording studios across the country. That the voice had finally cracked under the weight of what had been demanded of it. That whatever had made Whitney Houston extraordinary was gone, quietly and permanently, and no one quite knew how to say it out loud. The Bodyguard had been a massive success. The film, the soundtrack, the single. I Will Always Love You had become the best-selling single in the history of recorded music, a record so staggering it should have been the cleanest and most triumphant moment of a career, already overflowing with them. But success and peace are not the same thing, and 1993 had been anything but peaceful for Whitney. The personal struggles she kept carefully shielded from public view, the relentless scrutiny of every choice she made, the particular loneliness of being the most recognized voice in the world while feeling deeply unseen as a person, all of it was taking a toll that didn't show up on album covers, but was written clearly on the faces of the people who knew her best. When the American Music Awards announced that Whitney would not only attend the January 31st ceremony, but would perform live, I Will Always Love You, the song everyone on the planet already knew. The response from the music industry was not celebration, it was anxiety. It was the sharp, held breath of people who had watched stars fall before and were already preparing themselves for another one. Will she really sing live? That was the question in every entertainment column, every industry conversation, every quiet professional calculation from Los Angeles to New York. Nobody said it plainly, but everybody was thinking it. And nobody, not the producers, not the network, not the critics already sharpening their assessments, knew about the phone call that was going to happen that night in Detroit. Jennifer Williams was 34 years old on January 31st, 1994, and she had run out of reasons. That is how she would describe it years later. In the careful and measured voice of a woman who has spoken about a thing so many times that it has become almost clinical in the telling. The way survivors learn to hold their own stories at a slight distance so they can get through them without drowning. She had run out of reasons. The job had ended 3 months earlier, eliminated in a round of corporate layoffs that felt, through the distorting lens of severe depression, less like an economic decision and more like a verdict on her worth as a human being. The marriage was dissolving in that particular slow-motion way that is somehow crueler than a sudden ending, where you wake up every morning and have to watch the whole thing fall apart all over again from the beginning. The depression that had been circling her for years, that she had been managing and white-knuckling and convincing herself wasn't as serious as it actually was, had finally landed completely, and she could not see through it anymore. She could not see past it, around it, or to any point on the other side of it. January 31st was a Tuesday. She had made a plan, And then, at the very last possible moment, not because she felt hope, she would be careful to say this every time she told the story, but because some small, exhausted, stubborn fragment of herself was not quite ready to stop. She picked up the phone and dialed a number that a doctor had written on a card 3 months earlier and that she had carried in her wallet without ever using. The crisis hotline answered on the second ring. The counselor who picked up was 26 years old. His name was David Pierce, and he was 18 months into the job. He would say later at conferences and in interviews and in the quiet conversations that people who do this work have with each other, that the call with Jennifer Williams was the most important call he ever took. He kept her talking, gently and without drama, without the false cheerfulness that people in genuine crisis can always detect and dismiss immediately. Just presence, just the simple fact of staying on the line. Just I'm here. Keep talking to me. Give me 10 more minutes, he said. Just 10 more minutes. Can you do that? Jennifer said yes. She did not fully know why, but she said yes. The television was on in the background. She had not turned it off. She had not changed anything in the apartment because she had not expected to still be here, still talking, still listening to a stranger's patient voice on the other end of a phone. And then, through the receiver, David heard something shift in her breathing. Wait, she said. He went completely still. He had learned over 18 months that every change in a caller's voice meant something. Wait could mean anything. Wait, Jennifer said again. Is that Whitney Houston? At the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, 3,000 people had gone quiet in a way that felt different from ordinary silence. This was the silence of a crowd holding its collective breath. Whitney Houston had walked onto that stage in a burgundy gown, with her shoulders back and her chin lifted, and everything about her bearing communicating a confidence that the slight, barely visible tremor in her hands did not quite feel. 30 million Americans were watching from their living rooms. The piano began. That introduction, those simple, descending notes that every single person in the building and every single person watching at home knew before the first measure was finished. And then Whitney Houston opened her mouth. The first verse was perfect, not competent, not solid, not she's going to make it through this. Perfect. The kind of perfect that makes you feel foolish for having worried at all. The control was there. The warmth was there. That quality in her voice that journalists had spent years trying to describe and never quite managed to capture. The sense that it was coming from somewhere deeper than a human chest could account for. From somewhere that had nothing to do with technique and everything to do with a gift she had received before she understood what gifts were. The people in the audience exchanged glances. The executives who had positioned themselves near exits found reasons to settle back into their seats. And then she hit the chorus, and the whole room understood simultaneously. Not just that she was going to finish the performance, but that the voice was back. Entirely, undeniably, impossibly back. And then she hit the note, the money note. The one that critics had speculated for 2 years was now beyond her. It came out of her like she had been saving it, like she had kept it somewhere safe for 24 months, waiting for exactly this moment to spend it all at once. It climbed, and it kept climbing, past where the song required her to go, past any reasonable expectation, well into the territory of something that could only be called defiance. The Shrine Auditorium came to its feet in a single motion. 3,000 people rose as one, the way audiences do only when they know, even as it is happening, that they will carry what they just witnessed for the rest of their lives. In Detroit, David Pierce looked through the window of his booth at the small television his colleague had left on in the break room. He could see the stage, the burgundy gown, the standing ovation already beginning to cascade from the front rows backward through the building. Yes, he told Jennifer, it's the AMAs. She's performing live. There was a silence on Jennifer's end, then that was entirely different from every silence that had come before it in their conversation. Not the silence of someone drifting further away, the silence of someone who had found something to hold on to. Can someone turn it up? Jennifer said. David, can someone turn the TV up? David stepped to the door of his booth and asked his colleague to raise the volume. The sound came through the phone, imperfect, compressed by distance. Whitney's voice traveling from Los Angeles to Detroit through cables and satellites in the invisible infrastructure of a country that had absolutely no idea it was participating in something. Jennifer set the phone down in her lap. She did not hang up. She just listened. She listened to the whole thing. Every verse, every bridge, every note that climbed past where it had any business climbing. She listened to the eruption of the audience, the sound of 3,000 people discovering simultaneously that something they feared was not lost at all. She listened to the music finally resolve and settle into its ending. Then she picked the phone back up. "David," she said. "I'm here," he said. He had been waiting. He would have waited as long as it took. "She came back," Jennifer said. Her voice had changed, not healed. She would be careful about that word forever. But changed the way a room is different when someone opens a window. 2 years of everyone saying she was done, and she just came back. "Yes," David said. "She did." "I want to do that," Jennifer said. "I want to come back, too." That was the moment, the precise turning point she would describe for the rest of her life. The instant when something shifted from absolute darkness into a color she could not name yet, but could at least perceive. Not hope, the possibility of hope, which has to arrive first before hope itself is ready to follow. That night, Jennifer Williams did not go through with her plan. She agreed to let David's team help her reach a hospital. She went voluntarily. She sat in the back of a car and watched Detroit moving past in the dark, and thought about a woman in a burgundy gown who had walked onto a stage in front of 30 million people after 2 years of everyone saying the same thing. She's finished, she's lost it, she can't come back, and had answered all of them with a single climbing note. The recovery was not a single moment, and Jennifer would always insist on that. What happened that Tuesday night was a beginning, not an arrival. She didn't leave that hospital healed. She built her way back across years. Therapy, the slow, unglamorous work of reconstructing a life, a new job, a different and more honest relationship with the concept of a future. And always in the background of those years, Whitney Houston. She played the 1994 AMA performance When Things Got Hard, not as a cure, as a reminder of something she had understood clearly for one moment on January 31st, that coming back is possible. That silence is not the same thing as an ending. By 1998, Jennifer was a certified crisis counselor, 38 years old, nervous in a way she hadn't been since childhood, carrying something into those calls that no textbook had given her. The knowledge of exactly what it sounds like when someone on the other end has genuinely run out of reasons. She knew that voice. She had been it. In her sessions, she began doing something that surprised her colleagues. When a caller was truly at the furthest edge, she would tell a story. A woman in a burgundy gown. 2 years of silence, one stage, one note. The voice came back, she would say, when everyone said it was gone. And so can you. By 2005, she founded the Second Voice Foundation, combining crisis intervention with music therapy, using specific songs and the stories of survival behind them as active therapeutic tools. Whitney Houston's 1994 AMA performance was at the center of the curriculum from the first day. She came back when everyone said she couldn't. You can too. By 2011, the foundation had reached 20,000 people across 8 states. That spring, when Whitney Houston announced her first major concert tour in years, Jennifer bought a ticket the day they went on sale. She made a sign on white poster board in black marker. 6 words and a date. You saved my life, January 31st, 1994. She held it up through the entire concert, and about halfway through the night, Whitney Houston, scanning the crowd as performers do, reading faces and energy, and the particular love of an audience that has followed you through everything, stopped. She pointed. Security came. Jennifer was escorted backstage to a room that smelled like flowers and warm light, and then Whitney walked in and took Jennifer's hands in both of hers and said simply, "Tell me." So Jennifer told her everything. The apartment, the Tuesday, the plan and the phone and the voice that came through from Los Angeles, while a young crisis counselor held the line from the other side. The note that made the building rise. The 3 words she had spoken afterward. Whitney listened without interrupting. When Jennifer finished, the silence between them was the silence of someone who has just been given something real and is taking a moment to hold it with the care it deserves. Baby, Whitney said, I was singing for people like you. That night I didn't know it, but I was singing for people exactly like you. You showed me that comebacks are possible, Jennifer said. That's all I needed. Just to see that it was possible. Whitney squeezed her hands. And look at you now. Whitney Houston died on February 11th, 2012. Jennifer Williams sat with the news for a long time before she could move. In the weeks that followed, she made a decision and reached out to Whitney's estate and asked permission to rename the organization she had built. The answer came back. Yes. Whitney's Second Voice Foundation was established in the spring of 2012, and the 1994 AMA performance was embedded more deeply into its work than ever, not as memorial or nostalgia, but as medicine. By 2023, the foundation had reached more than 50,000 people. Jennifer was 63 years old and still took calls, still played that 4 minutes of audio in sessions when the moment called for it, still watched footage of a woman in a burgundy gown refusing to stop climbing and thought, there it is, there it is. At Whitney's Second Voice Foundation, every counselor training ends the same way. They play the recording without introduction and let it finish and sit with it in silence. Then Jennifer Williams looks at the room and says the thing she has said hundreds of times, the thing that has never once stopped being true. She came back when everyone said she couldn't. So can the people you're going to talk to. Your job is to hold the line long enough for them to hear it. 30 million people watched Whitney Houston at the 1994 American Music Awards and saw a comeback. One woman watched a lifeline. The industry wanted to know if she still had it. Jennifer Williams needed to know if survival was still possible. In a burgundy gown on a January night in Los Angeles, Whitney Houston answered both questions at once. And 30 years later, her voice is still doing the work, still climbing, still refusing to stop.